What is going on, my friend? It's Danny here from projectmanaverse.com, IT project managers for beginners. And today I'm going to talk about how to plan for your implementation event. So I'll talk about what it is, why you need to know about this, and how to do it. So let's dive straight into the video. So first of all, what is an implementation event? Take a step back. This channel is all about IT projects. So if you're an IT project manager, you're going to be building something, you're going to be developing something, some kind of software or application. And once you have done all the work and that development is complete, you need to give that something to some customers to actually use. And that is your actual point where you've gone live. We say you go live with your application or your system or your component, whatever you want to call it. So that go live event needs to be done typically out of hours when people aren't using the system. So take a step back. If you're upgrading a system, people are already using that system typically. So it's a software that's already being used by someone, application, customers, could be people within your organization, could be external customers. You're upgrading that system. So that means that it's there at the moment, people use it. So you typically would do an implementation outside of the period of time when people use that application. If people use it all the time, then you might have to take down the application for a few hours to do the implementation. But typically they're done out of office, and in my experience, implementations are generally done on a weekend. So that's what the implementation is. Now, as you go through your project and you build up your application or you upgrade it, you're doing all this development, and you do that development in various test environments. You can't do it directly in the production environment where customers are actually using it, because you can mess it up. If you start changing the code willy-nilly while the application is live, it will affect people's use of the application. So you can't do that. So what we do is we replicate the environment, like we clone, in a sense, the application that you're working on. So you have two versions of it. One of them is your test environment, and one of them is your production environment that's actually being used by customers. And it's in that test environment where you do all the testing and the project takes place. So all the work you do in your project will be in the test environment. And it's typically not just one test environment. There are several environments, which I'll talk about in other videos. But as you go through the project, you progress through the environments, and each environment is slightly closer to the live environment in terms of scale and performance and functionality. And then when you're ready to go live, you have to implement your application, implement your change and put it into the production environment. And that is what the implementation event is, and it is a big event. So that's what I'm talking about in this video. Now, why do you care about this as an IT project manager? Well, this is what you have been working for the whole project, and the project could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be 6 months, but it's a lot of effort and work, or leading up to this one moment. So this is your moment to shine as the project manager, not just as a project manager, but the whole team, but especially you as a project manager. You're going to be judged on this implementation. So you want it to go smoothly, because if you spend all this time working on this project and the implementation is a failure and you fail to put it live, or you put it live and it's got loads of issues and people can't properly use it and it's not working properly, then that is going to reflect poorly on you as the project manager. So this is what all that hard work and long hours and working with your team has been leading up to, this one moment to put it live. It's the culmination of all that effort. So it's really important that you understand this and it goes well for you. So make sure you listen and you take notes, and you're ready to do this when your time comes. The other reason it's important for you to understand it is that you might have to lead this event. You might lead it anyway because you're the project manager, so you're always going to be the overall lead of the project. But typically, because these projects are very, very technical, typically you would have a implementation manager working for you who is managing the implementation or the events of that implementation on the weekend. Now, sometimes you may not have an implementation manager and it might fall on yourself to do it. And that's more the case when the project is less complex and it's not as tricky. When it's reasonably straightforward, even though it's a technical project, you might have to do the implementation management yourself and all the stuff that comes with that. So you need to be aware, because as a IT project manager, you may be asked to lead and organize and manage the implementation. So it's important you pay attention. Okay, so that's why it's important. Now let's move on to how to plan for your implementation event. So there's several things I want to talk about in the how to planning stage. The first thing you need to think about is when you're actually going to do it. As I say, when you go live, I say go live with your application, you put it into the production environment and you have your implementation event. Typically, if you're a project manager in the IT world, you're working on systems that are already out there. So you're improving them in some way or fixing defects. So you're working on a system that is already being used by customers. So you can't put the thing live in normal day-to-day hours when the customer could be using the application. So you need to pick a time when no one is using it, or a reasonable time where you can take the application down. And that is usually on a weekend, because these things aren't usually done in a few hours. If it's a big project, they usually take the whole weekend to do, sometimes longer. So the first thing you need to do is find a date that works, that's acceptable to the customers, acceptable to the business. And you have to do a lot of stakeholder management and engagement and comms and discussions to pick that day. You also need to make sure that you've got the resources aligned to be able to support that weekend. You can't just book the weekend, then no one's around to actually work that weekend to do it. So you need to make sure people are lined up way in advance and your team is lined up way in advance to be able to work on that specific weekend and time. And you might need to you might have to work through or overcome some other restrictions. Typically, in an organization, a big organization, you can actually only put things into the production environment and go live with them on certain windows, in certain windows. So you have to look at your schedule, look at the company's release schedule, they call it, a release schedule, when you release code into the production environment, and pick the date that the best works for you. So that is the first point. Make sure you do a lot of work in terms of picking the implementation weekend, and then make sure that everyone is agreed and signed up to that and everyone is aware. So everyone knows that that is when you're going to go live, and you need to agree that months and months in advance of your go live. You want to do it pretty much as close to the start of the project as possible. So you have a few months at the start of the project to figure out what you're doing and get the plan together. But not long after that, you want to think and look ahead to that go live date and work towards the date and get it all agreed and scheduled in. So that's the first thing you need to do, is agree that go live date. The next thing you need to do is create a schedule of events, or an SOE. You'll hear that acronym a lot in project management. It's all about that implementation event and an SOE, schedule or sequence of events. It can be either term. And what that is a run book, a step-by-step guide of what is going to happen on that implementation weekend. All the things you need to do to be able to put that code or system into the production environment. And they can be quite complex and very tricky, and you need to have a lot of detail in that. It needs to be row by row, line by line, and you need to have a time for every single step of the process. Remember, you only have limited time to do this when the system is down, typically on a weekend, so every hour is precious. So you need to make sure you really kick the tires and thought about how long each step is going to take. Step by step, not only what the step is and what time it's going to take, the duration, and then also who exactly is going to do it. I emphasize that point. You must make sure you have an assigned owner, not just a team name, because that can lead to confusion and misunderstanding. You need a specific name or a specific lead for that step that you can call, and they have agreed to be on the hook to deliver that step. So that's what your schedule of events is. It's a sequence of steps that needs to happen to be able to implement or go live with your software application, whatever it is you are going live with. And just another tip on that schedule of events, you need to make sure that you leave enough time to back out your go live or back out your code if you need to, because that can happen. Sometimes you'll put the application live, and even though you've tested it thoroughly, it just doesn't work in the production environment, and you're running out of time until that Monday morning comes around. So you might have to take a decision to back out the implementation, and that takes many steps as well. That requires its own mini schedule of events. So you need to make sure that you plan for that scenario and that you have time to do that if it actually comes up. I never actually had to back out before, which is good in my years of project management. So if you do it right, you shouldn't need to do that, but you always have to plan for that in case it does actually happen. Okay, so that's number 2, the schedule of events. Make sure you do that. And you usually do that, start to put that together about 6 weeks before your implementation. The earlier that you can do it, the better. But in the real world, and this is all about real world IT project management, it can be left quite late, and sometimes I've seen SOEs that have been put together far too late, literally like a week or two before the implementation. You want to do it, I think 6 weeks is a good comfortable amount of time leadway to be able to get one ready, and you want to have regular calls, constantly reviewing it with your team, refining it as you go along. Start with what you know and then keep adding detail and keep improving it. One more tip about the schedule of events. You don't just want the activities and all the steps, you want the prerequisites. So before you can even start the implementation, it's Saturday morning, you're ready to go. What needs to have happened before you can even start? And there will be a list of activities that you do in the preceding couple of weeks or days. So make sure that's clearly captured with owners as well. Okay, that's enough about the schedule of events. I could probably do a whole video about that. Let's move on to the next part. The next part, it's something that people fall down on quite a lot, but it's a very, very simple thing. Just make sure you have everyone's contact details in your schedule of events. So in a separate workbook, whatever, in a separate tab or another workbook, you want to make sure you've got every person that is involved in that implementation event, what their role and responsibility is, and that's all been pre-agreed, and what their contact details are, not just their work details, but their personal mobile phones. So if you can't get hold of them, you can just on your company network or company phones and all that, you've got another means of getting hold of them, because it's really important, because you can have a single point of failure, i.e. you need this person to be able to complete this go live, and without them the whole thing fails. You do not want to be in that position where you can't get hold of them because they're sick or they've forgotten or whatever. So make sure you have everyone's contact details. You also want to make sure you have agreed escalation contacts as well. So there'll be various stakeholders, senior leaders that have an interest and have power on your project. And if things are not going well and you need to make a decision that they need to be involved in, you need to be able to contact them, to drag them onto a call and discuss the problem and come to a resolution. So you need to make sure that those people know they're on standby for that weekend. They might get a call, and if they do, they need to drop everything and dial into that call and be part of the discussion. So make sure you have your escalation point contacts captured and you got their numbers as well. Okay, that's point number 3. That's your contact details. Point number 4. What was my point number 4? Yes. So you need to agree beforehand, how are you going to run the implementation? When I say how are you going to run it, obviously you've got your schedule of events, but how are you actually going to track that each step has been done? It has to be, these things are step-by-step critical, and you have to coordinate it so carefully. So you can do that by various ways. You can do it on a conference call with everyone on it for the whole day, and people are just always on in the background, and you're calling out the steps and you're ticking off the activities as you go along. Typically these days, in my experience, they're done on a Teams chat, some kind of group chat, where you've got the whole history of what's happened, and every time a step in that SOE has been completed, and it will have a specific number, you just tick that off. And then you make sure that the person who has done this. Sorry, let me take a step back. Once a step has been done, the person that has done that step should update in the chat that they have done it. So the person that is owning the SOE, could be you, could be your implementation manager, can tick it off in your SOE and workbook, so you can see every step that's been done. And you've also got the evidence that it has been done by the person that has done it. So that's what you need to do. Just agree how you're going to manage the implementation event. If you're going to do it on your Teams chat, You might want to put in some checkpoint calls throughout the day so you can get onto a call and discuss things. So it's advisable to put those in the diary ahead of the implementation weekend, maybe every couple of hours, just a 15-minute checkpoint. Everyone jumps on, you can just discuss what needs to be discussed. And of course, if there is a issue and you are blocked on something, say there's something's not working on your SOE, you might just have to have an ad hoc call and just jump onto a call and do that. So just agree ahead how it's all going to work. Make sure the meeting's in the diary, and everyone that is on that, if you're going to do it by a Teams chat, just make sure that everyone is on that Teams chat so you're ready to go on the weekend itself. So that's the tip number 4. Now the last tip I'm going to talk about, because I'm running out of time, is if you can, you want to actually practice this implementation. Literally have a dress rehearsal, we call it, a dress rehearsal of the events. So like in a dance show or a theatre show, what they do is they have their main live events. You know, you're going live. They practice that and they have a dress rehearsal event, and that's with all the costumes. They do it exactly as it would be done if they were going to do a live performance. And that's what we're doing with the dress rehearsal in the IT world. We do everything exactly as we would do it. We actually put the code in the production environment, but what we do is we back it out. You know, at the start I said you might have to have your back out event, and what this allows you to do actually allows you to practice the back out and prove that works as well, which is good. But it gives you so much confidence if you can get in a dress rehearsal weekend. You put everything into production, but you just don't release it to the public, or you don't put data through the system, and you just make sure you can do the steps. You might do a little smoke test with a little bit of data that you can delete, and then back all the code out, and then you've proven that it works, and it will give you so much confidence for when the real event actually happens. Now sometimes you could debate if you practice it and it actually works the first time, then just leave it in there, and that does happen sometimes. But typically your dress rehearsal event is planned in advance of your production live event, and you're not quite ready, so you don't have all the elements ready to actually go live, but you can do most of it. That's how it typically works. Okay, so that's the video. I hope you found it useful, and until the next time, please take care.